Hi Quilty friends, welcome to month 5. In month 5, we're going to use one of the tools that you've purchased, the wing clipper. Okay, if you are intending to use the wing clipper, then remember you need to use our cutting instructions, not the cutting instructions that came with your pattern. If you're not going to use it, then you will use the cutting instructions with your pattern. Okay, so when you're done, here's what you're going to have. You're going to actually be doing the same thing twice, once large and once small. So to make the large flying geese, you use this great big 7.5-inch black square and these 4 blue squares. I have one here. Okay, and then you have 4 black squares, and those are going to be the corners for when you actually put the block together, so put it aside. To make the small one, which this is what you're going to end up with, you're going to use this blue 4.5-inch square and these 4 white 2.5-inch squares, and then this is going to be the center and these are the corners. So eventually this is what's going to happen. You're going to sew this together like a mini block. That mini block becomes the center of your large block. Okay, so this is this, and now we're going to make the big flying geese that go around it, and these are the 4 black corners. Okay, so let's make the large flying geese. Okay, first thing is, on the 4 blue squares, and they might be red squares, they might be yellow squares, you're going to make this 8 times in 8 different colors. The black and white will be exactly the same in each square. You'll just be changing out the color. The blue might become red, it might become yellow, it might become green. Okay, so you'll do it 8 times. Okay, you need to draw lines, just like we did for half square triangles, on these blue 4.5-inch squares, 4-inch squares, and the white 2.5-inch squares. Okay, remember the tip about the fine sandpaper? Okay, you're going to put your square on the fine sandpaper. It helps to hold the square and your ruler, your little magic wand, or your ruler if you're just drawing diagonal lines with a ruler. Okay, but the great thing is this is on the bias and it kind of clings to the sandpaper so the bias doesn't get stretched as you draw that line. Okay? All right. Now, we need to sew this together, and you are going to you're going to skip steps 1 through 7 here because we're going to do it a different way using our wing clipper ruler. Okay, but the one thing you do need to note is it does tell you the finished sizes. The big one, the finished size is going to be 3.5 by 6.5. And by finished, I mean cut size, the size that it's ready to go into your quilt. And the small ones are 2 by 3.5. So these are 2 by 3.5 right now. That's what we're going to trim them down to. So you might want to circle those dimensions in your pattern. So we're doing the bigger one. We're looking for these to end up trimmed at 3.5 by 6.5. Okay. We take this and we're going to put 2 of these on here. Now, if you read the directions for the wing clipper, she suggests that you pull these off the edge a little bit. But I'm going to be real honest. If you do that, they tend to get a little bit small. So I would line the raw edges up, and the same thing here. Line the raw edges up. Okay, and then you're going to sew, and then you want these lines to line up as well, because we're going to sew straight across like this. Okay? The other tip that I have for you is if the best thing to do is you definitely don't want to sew on the outside here. You want to sew a little more toward the inside of this line rather than toward the outside. That makes your pieces just a little bit bigger, and we want as much help as we can get when we go to put these together and trim them up. Okay, so I'm gonna put a pin where these come together so that, and I want to sew so that I'm going on to this one without having to, I don't want to sew this way with this peak up. I want to sew this way so that I'm sewing right onto this next piece, okay? All right, remember that your stitch length should be at 1.8. And whatever foot makes it easiest for you to sew on a line is the foot that you should have on your machine. Okay, that went well. I went right from one square on to the next one. Okay. Rid of this long tail I've got. Okay, and now sew the other side, and again, if possible, I want to stitch a little bit to the inside of the line. I want to be on the inside edge of the line. I don't want to really be off the line, but I want to be to the inside edge rather than the outside edge. So if you have a marker that makes kind of a thick line, you want to sew to the inside of that line. Okay. All right. Now we're going to take our regular ruler and we're going to cut right down the center. This is almost like, probably reminds you of making 2 half-square triangles. Only we're going to end up with a really odd-looking piece. All right, now we have to press these. You always press toward the smaller triangle. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to press this way. Okay, now remember, this is a bias edge, so you don't want to be rough and ready. You want to be gentle, but you want to get a good press. And then turn it over and make sure you press this way, so that you know you don't have any folds here. Okay? At this point it looks more like a Halloween mask than it does like flying geese, but hang in there. Okay. Now we're going to take this one and we're going to put it like this. And again, her instructions say to back this off the edges, but I found I had better luck if I put my raw edges together. Okay, and what should be happening is these lines should be coming out right in these V's that are forming here. See the V that forms, or the corner? Those lines should be coming out right into those corners. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. So on the line, or a little to the inside edge of the line. Okay, and make sure your seams are laying flat underneath, because we don't want to create any extra bulk. And my needle should be coming right out into that corner there, and it did. Okay, one more time. missed. There. Now, we're going to cut it down the middle, just like we did before. Point to point. Okay, and again, we're going to press them toward a smaller square. And as you see, there's our flying geese. Okay, now we need to trim them. All right, we would do the same thing with this piece, putting this blue one here, sewing on those 2 lines, cutting, and we would end up with 2 more because we need 4 of them. Okay, now, we're right here. We're ready to trim. So we're going to make it look like this. So we're going to point the point this way, and we're going to turn our ruler so that the X's are over here. And remember, we want it to be 3.5 by 6.5. So I want to just eye up 3.5 by 6.5, and then that shows me the angle here that I want. Okay, I'm not going to have much to trim here, but I've got a little bit to trim. And again, it's like the Tucker ruler. You have to play a little bit and be patient until you get it where you need it to be. I'm gonna trim here, and remember, it's not non-slip. You really have to put your weight on it. The other option is to put Invisigrip on the back. Okay, now I turn it, a complete turn, and now my point is pointing to the left. So now I line up the 3.5 line and the 6.5 line. And what should be happening is this point should be falling into one of these X's here, which it is. Okay, and I trim here, the top and the left side. And on the left side, I don't have a lot to trim, but that's okay. It didn't trim off. And I don't have a scissors anywhere. Find the scissors. Okay, I'm just going to use the scissors to get rid of that point. Very hard. You have to really lay into your cutter because there's a lot of layers there. So there's one, and let's do one more. Okay, remember, my point's going to point to the right first. My X's will be on the left. My X's are always going to be on the left in both cuts. Okay, and I put it at approximately 3.5 by 6.5, and I find the angle.
This is backwards on the screen. I know the point is pointing to the left, but we can't get a good angle, and she can't cut if I'm over her shoulder. So follow the
directions in the
pattern, but it is backwards on the screen.
All right. Now I'm going to cut across the top and down this side, and this is the easier side to cut because there's no point here. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it completely so it points the other direction. And I'm going to line it up with the 3.5 and the 6.5. And it should fall into a point here. can be hard to see the black line against the black edge, but take it off a little bit and then you'll figure out where it is. Okay. I'm gonna cut here, and this is the harder cut because of that point. Go over it again. There, I got it that time. Okay, so now I have 2 flying geese, and what you will end up doing is these are gonna be here and here, and then the 2 that you would make with this would be here, and your black squares go in the corners. So there is your block.
So you have a star and a star, huh?
You do. So you've really made it, for each block you make your flying geese twice, once large, once small. Okay? Happy wing clipping.